Hi everyone, Triple Aqua here from the West. I'm Mermaid Christiane and thank you for joining my YouTube channel. So today I want to talk to everyone about perception and how perception can really take us down a rocky path if we let it, because it's that age-old saying, don't judge a book by its cover, but yet we do. We do this all the time. And it's interesting enough, I was, just to tell you a little bit, an example and a little bit about my background. I've been in retail since I was 14, and I was a buyer for a large corporate company here in Key West. And so I've been technically a buyer for about 16 years now. And one of the things that I always found interesting, and I learned really quickly when we would go into the food section of the mart in Atlanta, we would buy food, and even though we were able to taste the food and you sample it and talk to the vendors that were selling their food and their wares, it was interesting because really what was important to us as buyers was the packaging and how it looked on the outside. Because when you go into a store, you're not able to open it up. So the more attractive the packaging is, chances are it's going to sell. So that's what we would look for. How pretty it was on the outside, how appealing it was to the eye, and if it called your attention, if you gravitated towards it. And people are like that also. We always judge a book by its cover unless we practice discernment, and we also practice tapping into our inner knowledge, our intuition, and we also practice temperance, which is pretty much how to alchemize energies, and it really ultimately boils down to having patience. So when you meet people for the first time, and I'll put myself as an example again, most people meet me, they think that I'm an airhead, I only have cotton between my ears, I'm very Pollyanna, oh she's too nice, oh she seems like a fake. And then you have the other side of the coin, like, oh, she's so sweet and she's so nice. Well, a lot of times people underestimate my niceness for weakness, and I guess it's sort of a superpower, because I can be one way, but then I can also be the other side of the spectrum also, just like most of us can. Now, do I turn on the drop of a dime? Usually not. It would take a lot for me to basically be aggressive with someone, and it would only be in a point where I feel like I'm being physically attacked, not mentally, or maybe my personal bubble, somebody coming in too close to me or something like that will be like, whoa, wait a minute, step back, guy or girl. But other than that, yeah, I get that a lot, where people perceive me to be one way, and after a while they're around me and they're like, whoa, we got a live one here. Because we tend to just look at the outside. I was talking to a friend, and they were saying how you can dress people up a certain way and ask who do you think is the most dangerous person in that group, and of course they wouldn't pick the person that's dressed like a business person or the woman with the dog. And so you perceive with your eyes, obviously, and it is important to use your eyes, but also use them with wisdom, and also use your ears, because once we label somebody, we kind of want to put them in that little box and keep them there. And that's really not fair. We should take our time, have patience in relationships, and sometimes we don't have longevity with relationships. It's just in passing, but even then, don't put a label on somebody. Don't judge them, because you don't know what the core of that person is. A lot of times when you meet people, you've had this experience many times. You meet someone and they seem a certain way, but when you start peeling one layer of that onion back and one layer of the onion back, sometimes it's rotten, but it seemed really beautiful and shiny on the outside, like that other saying, everything that shines isn't gold. So my grandmother used to say something, and then as a child, I used to be like, what does she mean by that? And as I got older, I realized she used to say in Spanish, and God rest her soul, she used to say, siéntate en tu portal y ve a tus enemigos que pasan. What that means is sit on your porch and watch your enemies go by. But she didn't mean that like enemies, like people trying to attack you. What she meant is sit back and pay attention. Listen, watch, observe, and you will realize who's who for who, what people are made out of. And I feel that in a society where we are, basically it's a microwave society. We all want it now, we don't have time. You know, we seem to slap a label on somebody and then move on, and then that's who that person is for a long time. But you're missing out, because if you're able to be around that person for a long time, you'll misjudge them, and then you'll act accordingly towards them because of your perceived perception of them. And then that's not fair, because then what happens is later on you realize, ooh, I was really wrong about that person. And hopefully that person doesn't cut you off at the knees and gives you another opportunity, because a lot of times when we do perceive a person to be there, then we feel like, oh, they're a waste of time, I'm not going to even talk to them. You know, a lot of times I'll be at a lot of different social events, and it's interesting, the people that you talk to, that they'll be talking to you, but they're looking over your shoulder to see who's more important in the room to talk to than you are. And I always find that fascinating, how, you know, they really don't want to talk to you, but they're doing it just on a social graces. Well, why even bother? Why even bother if you're not going to pay attention to someone's conversation, to what they're talking to you about? You know, if that's the case, then just don't waste your time. Go on and maybe scan the whole room and then pick who you're going to talk to that way. But you know, it's interesting enough, people do it, I guess, to keep things on an even keel and just be social. Well, if you are going to do that, then give that person your undivided attention, whether it be for a minute, 2 minutes, you know, excuse yourself if you have to go, but let's not have a conversation and look over their shoulder to see who else is more important in the room to talk to, basically. Yeah, I'm trying not to do that quote thing. I do that sometimes. And I feel like we miss out on so much when we do that. And, you know, our mouths say a lot of things too. Once we put a label on somebody, we'll say, yeah, that person's this, this, and this, or, you know, we might even talk about it amongst friends or other groups about that person. And, you know, and then it kind of, not everyone is wise enough to get their own perception of somebody in a healthy way. So they can take what you're saying at face value and then not give that person an opportunity, because maybe you had a bad experience, or just worse, you're just perceiving them to be a certain way and they're really not. So our mouths tend to, because we label somebody, then we pass a judgment, then we articulate, or we say, or we just don't want to wait, I'm not going to waste my time with that person. Well, remember that your eyes and your ears are really important. That's why we have two, and we have two, we just have one mouth. And the mouth has multiple purposes. I mean, you can do, you could only do so much with your eyes and your ears, and there's a reason for that. It's because you're supposed to, you know, watch. You're supposed to be observant. You're supposed to listen, and then that way you can get the whole story. Because that's another thing. There's 3 sides to every story: yours, theirs, and the truth. So when we perceive people to be a certain way, we're really missing out on a lot. So take your time getting to know people. Sit back and watch and observe before you pass a judgment, before you put them in a little tiny box where you I can never say that word, departmentalize? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. That word, and there's another word that I had the worst time saying it. Anyway, I'll think of it, or it'll happen in another video. And so yeah, we tend to put them in this unfair little box, and then what happens is later on you're like, oh, that wasn't fair, you know, that person really didn't deserve that, because they have so much to their personality. And that's the thing, We are all our own universe. Everyone has so much of their personality, and because people tend to do this, people tend to feel that they have to be something that they're not, that they have to put on airs, that they have to put on certain personality to be able to fit in or to be liked, because they don't want to be perceived as something else. Well, forget that. Throw it out the door. Be who your authentic self is, because that is who is going to come out at the end of the day. You know, my old boss, Mr. Whipple, used to say, and I say this, he used to say, we all have warts. Sooner or later, they all come out. And I was like, oh, warts. But, you know, he meant we all have imperfections. We all, so what you see on the outside is not what you get on the inside. Now, hopefully what you're seeing on the outside is what's on the inside, and that would be great. That's a very balanced person. That's a person who knows who they are. They're not afraid to march to the beat of their own band. And again, I know it's strong, but I march to a band. Don't perceive people to be a certain way until you have all of the facts. And even so, if you meet somebody in passing, don't put a label on them, because another thing is you don't know if someone's having a bad day, or if they just had to put their dog down, or there's so many different factors to why a person is behaving or acting or has the resting biatch face, like people say. Oh, they don't really say that. They say the other thing. I think I'm gonna sneeze. False alarm. They don't label people and don't perceive people to be a certain way, because you will be surprised sooner or later. Sometimes, hopefully, you'll be surprised in a good way, and you'll be like, wow, what a pleasant surprise. That person is the genuine person that they are acting like they are, or they are perceiving to be, or that's just who they are. But then you have, you know, the sheep and wolves clothing, and then you're like, oh man. And had you sat back on your porch and just watched and paid attention, all of the warts would have come out sooner or later, because none of us are perfect. We all have them. So I think that's just my message for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will get out today and ground yourself. And it's a beautiful day again here in Key West. Springtime is one of my favorite times here. I'm even wearing a butterfly dress because I love spring. So we're gonna pull, or I'm gonna pull from the Good Tarot. It's a really interesting take on this. It's not like your typical tarot deck. All right, and see what messages or message we have for today. So remember, do not judge a book by its cover. It's funny, we've heard that so many times over and over again for so many years and centuries, and we still continue to do it. I mean, I don't know why we're so hard-headed. It's like, if you really just listen to the little tiny details and the little lessons, really, because people have gone through these things before us. Our ancient ancestors have gone through all of these things, and so they've learned these lessons not to judge a book by cover. Wow, that one just flipped out. Oh, cool. This is the happiest card in the deck, by the way. It's the Sun card. If you get the Sun card, it is the happiest card in the deck, because it's shiny and bright, and that's kind of, I mean, it's not even kind of, it is perfect for what I'm talking about and what the message is today, because the sun illuminates everything. In the daytime, you can see it all. And that's what happens when we take our time to get to know the people around us, or even just not perceive. Sooner or later, that light is going to shine on, and the sun is going to come out, and we are going to see who that person is. Wow, how beautiful. And look at the sunflowers. Sunflowers are beautiful, you know, they're perfect. Like now, sunflowers are springing up everywhere, but you know, there again, that's something that's like, you know, you put the seed in the dirt, and then eventually it's in the dark, but then eventually it has to come out into the light. And that's what our personality traits, our character, our integrity, it eventually comes out sooner or later. So don't make those very harsh judgment calls on people or perceive them to be a certain way. You know, it's the 19 card, and 19 in numerology breaks down to a 10, which means a new beginning. So start your day today. And remember, these messages are timeless. So whenever you watch this message, it's when you were meant to hear it. So whether it's a week from now, a year from now, hours from now, if it resonates with you, well, then this message was for you. So start a new beginning. Let's get to know people. Let's watch, let's listen, let's observe before we put a label on them. And I think we'll be a lot happier that way, because we won't be disappointed whether we treated that person right or we treated that person wrong, or we let them in when we should have kind of not let that energy in. If we take our time, sooner or later, everything is illuminated. All right, y'all, thank you so much. And I'll just leave you with my last little message that I leave you all the time. Keep swimming towards your dreams. Bye.